filming it. So, yes. Anyways, today's book is my current read. Say nothing, say nothing, say by Patrick Radden Keefe, a true story of murder and memory in Northern Ireland. This is a nonfiction book, and it's on like a lot of different like lists, and also on like Barack Obama's favorite book of the year. Anyways, I will read a little bit of what it says in the back, and we can read the book together. I'm not even finished with this book. I'm like a third of the way in. In December 1972, Jean McConville, a 38-year-old mother of 10, was dragged from her Belfast home by masked intruders, her children clinging to her legs. They never saw her again. Everyone in the neighborhood knew the IRA was responsible, but in a climate of fear and paranoia, no one would speak of it. Patrick Radden Keefe's mesmerizing book on the bitter conflict in Northern Ireland and its aftermath uses the McConville case as a starting point for the tale of a society racked by a violent guerrilla war, a war whose consequences have never been reckoned with. From radical and impetuous IRA terrorists such as Dolores Price, who was planting bombs and targeting informers when she was barely out of her teens, to the spy games and dirty schemes of the British Army, to Jerry Adams, who negotiated the peace but betrayed his hardcore comrades by denying his IRA past. Say Nothing conjures a world of passion, betrayal, vengeance, and anguish, which I feel like especially like so far of what I've read, like betrayal and passion, yes, and vengeance, yeah, I guess like it sums up very like good. So I'll read a little bit of the author. Let's see. Patrick Radden Keefe is a staff writer at The New Yorker and the author of the New York Times bestseller Empire of Pain, The Secret History of the Sackler Dynasty, winner of the 2021 Bailey Gifford Prize for Nonfiction, and wrote true stories of grifters, killers, rebels, and crooks. His previous books are The Snakehead and Chatter. His work has been recognized with the Guggenheim Fellowship, the National Magazine Award for Feature Writing, and the Orwell Prize for Political Writing. He is also the creator and host of the 8-part podcast, Wind of Change. And let's move on to the actual book, Say Nothing. Prologue. The Treasure Room, July 2013. The John J. Burns Library occupies a grand neo-Gothic building on the Levy campus of Boston College. With its stone spires and stained glass, it looks very much like a church. The Jesuits who founded the university in 1863 did so to educate the children of poor immigrants who had fled the potato famine in Ireland. As Boston College grew and flourished over the next century and a half, it maintained close ties to the old country. With 250,000 volumes and some 16 million manuscripts, the Burns Library holds the most comprehensive collection of Irish political and cultural artifacts in the United States. One of its librarians years ago was sent to prison after he was caught trying to sell to Sotheby's a tract by St. Thomas British grave robber tried to sell him looted tombstones bearing ancient Latin crosses and intricate rings and inscriptions. The rarest and most valuable objects in the Burns Library are kept in a special enclosure known as the Treasure Room. It is a secure space exacting, climate-controlled, and outfitted with a state-of-the-art fire suppression system. The room is monitored by surveillance cameras and can be accessed only by entering a code on an electronic pad and turning a special key. The key must be signed out. Only a select handful of people can do so. One summer day in 2013, two detectives strode into the Burns Library. They were not Boston detectives. In fact, they had just flown into the country from Belfast, where they worked for the serious crime branch of the police service of Northern Ireland. Passing beneath the colorful stained glass windows, they approached the treasure room. The detectives had done to collect a series of secret files that for nearly a decade had been stored in the treasure room. There were many discs containing audio recordings as well as a series of transcripts. The librarians at Boston College might have saved the detectives a trip by just sending the files to Belfast in the mail, but these recordings contained sensitive and dangerous secrets. And when they took possession of the material, the detectives handled it with the utmost care. The recordings were now officially evidence in a criminal proceeding. The detectives were investigating a murder. Like, I'm smiling and all, but like when you think about it, how, like, I'm smiling because I'm excited to share this with you, but when you think about how horrific this period was for the people in Ireland, in Belfast, in the north of Ireland, it's crazy to feel like your life is always on edge. Just going to the grocery store, it's crazy. But let's get started. Book 1, The Clear, Clean, Sheer Thing. Chapter 1, An Abduction. Jane McConville was 38 when she disappeared, and she has spent nearly half her life either pregnant or recovering from childbirth. She brought 14 children to term and lost 4 of them, leaving her with 10 kids who ranged in age from Anne, who was 20, to Billy and Jim, the sweet-eyed twins, who were 6. To bear 10 children, much less care for them, would seem like an impossible feat of endurance. But this was Belfast in 1972, where immense, unruly families were the norm. So Jane McConville wasn't looking for any prizes, and she didn't get any. Instead, life dealt her an additional test when her husband Arthur died. After a grueling illness, he was suddenly gone, and she was left alone, a widow with a meager pension, but no paying job of her own, and all of those children to look after. Demoralized by the magnitude of her predicament, she struggled to maintain an even emotional keel. She stayed at home, mostly leaning on the older kids to wrangle the younger ones, steadying herself as if from vertigo with one cigarette after another. Jean reckoned with her misfortune and endeavored to make plans for the future, but the real tragedy of the McConville clan had just begun. The family had recently moved out of the apartment where Arthur spent his final days and into a slightly larger dwelling in Divis Flats, a dank and hulking public housing complex in West Belfast. It was a cold December, and the city was engulfed in darkness by the end of the afternoon. The stove in the new apartment was not hooked up yet, so Jean sent her daughter Helen, who was 15, to a local takeaway restaurant for a bag of fish and chips. While the rest of the family waited for Helen, Jean drew a hot bath. When you have young children, sometimes the only place you can find a moment of privacy is behind a locked bathroom door. Jean was small and pale, with delicate features and dark hair that she wore pulled back from her face. She slipped into the water and stayed there. She had just gotten out of the bath. Her her skin flushed when somebody knocked on the front door. It was about 7. The children assumed it must be Helen with their dinner. But when they opened the door, a gang of people burst inside. It happened so abruptly that none of the McConville children could say precisely how many there were. It was roughly 8 people, but it could have been 10 or 12. There were men and women. Some had balaclavas pulled across their faces. Others wore nylon stockings over their heads, which twisted their features into ghoulish masks. At least one of them was carrying a gun. As Jean emerged pulling on her clothes, surrounded by her frightened children, one of the men said gruffly, "Put your coat on." She trembled violently as the intruders tried to pull her out of the apartment. "What's happening?" she asked, her panic rising. That was when the children went berserk. Michael, who was 11, tried to grab his mother. Billy and Jim threw their arms around her and wailed. The gang tried to calm the children, saying that they would bring Jean back. They just needed to talk to her. She would be gone for only a few hours. Archie, who at 16 was the oldest child at home, asked if he could accompany his mother wherever she was going, and the members of the gang agreed. Jean McConville put on a tweed overcoat and a headscarf as the younger children were herded into one of the bedrooms. While they were ushering the children away, the intruders spoke to them, offering blunt assurances and addressing them by name. A couple of men were not wearing masks, and Michael McConville realized to his horror that the people taking his mother away were not strangers. They were his neighbors. Divis Flats was a nightmare from an Escher drawing, a concrete warren of stairway passages and overcrowded apartments. The elevator were perpetually out of order, and Jean McConville was borne by the rough little scrum out of her flat, through a corridor and down a set of stairs. Normally, there were people about at night, even in the winter time, kids kicking a ball through the hallway or laborers coming home from work, but Archie noticed that the complex seemed eerily vacant, almost as if the area had been cleared. There was nobody to flag down, no neighbor who could sound the alarm. He kept close to his mother, shuffling along, and she clung to him, not wanting to let go. But at the bottom of the stairs, a large group was waiting, as many as 20 people, casually dressed, masked with balaclavas. Several of them had guns. A blue Volkswagen van sat idling at the curb, and now suddenly one of the men wheeled on Archie. The dull glint of pistol arcing through the darkness and pressed the tip of the barrel into his cheek. Hissing, "Fuck off." Archie froze. He could feel the cold metal pressing into his skin. He was desperate to protect his mother, but what could he do? He was a boy, outnumbered and unarmed. Reluctantly, he turned and ascended the stairs. On the second level of the wall, one of the walls was perforated by a series of vertical slats, which the McConville children called pigeonholes. Peering through these openings, Archie watched as his mother was bundled into the van, and the van drove out of Divis and disappeared. It would later strike him that the gang never had any intention of allowing him to chaperone his mother. They were simply using him to get Jean out of the flat. He stood there in the awful wintry silence, trying to comprehend what had just happened and what he should do now. Then he started back toward the flat. The last words that his mother had said to him were, "Watch children until I come back." Chapter 2. Albert's Daughters. When Dolores Price was a little girl, her favored saints were martyrs. Dolores had one very Catholic aunt on her father's side who would say for God and Ireland. For the rest of the family, Ireland came first. Growing up in West Belfast in the 1950s, she dutifully went to church every Sunday, but she noticed that her parents didn't. One day, when she was about 14, she announced, "I'm not going back to Mass." "You have to go," her mother, Chrissy, said. "I don't, and I'm not going," Dolores said. "You have to go," Chrissy repeated. "Look," Dolores said. "I'll go out the door. I'll stand at the corner for half an hour and say to you, I've been to Mass, but I won't have been to Mass." She would was headstrong even as a child, so that was the end of that. The Prices lived in a small, semi-detached council house on a tidy sloping street in Andersonstown called Sleepgallion Drive. Her father, Albert, was an upholsterer. He made the chairs that occupy the cramped front room, but where another glam might adorn the mantelpiece with happy photos from family holidays, the Prices displayed with great pride snapshots taken in prisons. Albert and Chrissy Price shared a fierce commitment to the cause of Irish republicanism. The belief that for 100 years the British had been an occupying force on the island of Ireland, and that the Irish had a duty to expel them by any means necessary. When Dolores was little, she would sit on Albert's lap and he would tell her stories about joining the Irish Republican Army when he was still a boy in the 1930s, and about how he had gone off to England as a teenager to carry out a bombing raid with cardboard within his shoes because he couldn't afford to patch the soles. He had dared to challenge the mighty British Empire. A small man with wired frame glasses and fingertips stained yellow by tobacco, Albert told violent tales about the fabled valor of long-dead patriots. Dolores had two other siblings, Damien and Claire, but she was closest with her younger sister, Marion. Before bedtime, their father liked to regale them with the story of the time he escaped from a jail in the city of Derry, along with 20 other prisoners after digging a tunnel that led right out of the facility. One inmate played the bagpipes to cover the sound of the escape. In confiding tones, Albert would lecture Dolores and her siblings about the safest method for mixing improvised explosives with a wooden bowl and wooden utensils, never metal. Because a single spark and you were gone. He liked to reminisce about the beloved comrades whom the British had hanged, and Dolores grew up thinking that this was the most natural thing in the world, that every child had parents who had friends who had been hanged. Her father's stories were so rousing that she shivered sometimes when she listened to them, her whole body tingling with goosebumps. Everyone in the family, more or less, had been to prison. Chrissy's mother, Granny Dolan, had been a member of the IRA Women's Council, the Common and had once served 3 months in Armagh jail for attempting to relieve a police officer from the Royal Ulster Constabulary of his service weapon. Chrissy had also served in the Common and done a stretch in Armagh, along with 3 of her sisters after they were arrested for wearing a band emblem, little paper flowers of orange, white, and green known as Easter lilies. In the Price family, as a Northern Ireland in general, people had a tendency to talk about calamities from the bygone past as though they had happened just last week. As a consequence, it could be difficult to pinpoint where the story of the ancient quarrel between Britain and Ireland first began. Really, it was hard to imagine Ireland before what the Prices referred to simply as the cause. It almost didn't matter where you started the story, it was always there. It predated the distinction between Protestant and Catholic. It was older than the Protestant Church. You could go back nearly 1,000 years, in fact, to the Norman raiders of the 12th century who crossed the Irish Sea on ships in search of new lands to conquer, or to Henry VIII and the Tudor rulers of the 16th century who started England's total subjugation of Ireland, or to the Protestant immigrants from Scotland and north of England who filtered into Ireland over the course of the 17th century and established a plantation system in which the Gaelic-speaking natives became tenants and vassals on land that had previously been their own. But the chapter in this saga that loomed largest in the house on Sleeve-Gallion Drive was the Easter Rising of 1916, in which a clutch of Irish revolutionaries seized the post office in Dublin and declared the establishment of a free and independent Irish republic. Dolores grew up hearing legends about the dashing heroes of the Rising, about the sensitive poet who was one of the leaders of the rebellion, Patrick Pearse. In every generation, the Irish people have asserted their right to national freedom, Pearse declared on the post office steps. Pierce was inveterate romantic, was deeply attracted to the ideal of blood sacrifice. Even as a child, he had fantasies of pledging his life for something, and he came to believe that bloodshed was a cleansing thing. Pierce praised the Christ-like deaths of previous Irish martyrs and wrote a few years before the rising that the old heart of the earth needed to be warmed with the red wine of the battlefield. He got his wish. After a brief moment of glory, the rebellion was mercilessly squashed by British authorities in Dublin, and Pierce was court-martialed and executed by a firing squad along with 14 of his comrades. After the Irish War of Independence led to the partition of Ireland in 1921, the island was split into two. In the south, 26 counties achieved a measure of independence as the Irish Free State, while the north, the remaining 6 counties continued to be ruled by Great Britain. Like other staunch Republicans, the Price family did not refer to the place where they happened to reside as Northern Ireland. Instead, it was the north of Ireland. In the fraud local vernacular, even proper nouns could be political. A cult of martyrdom can be a dangerous thing, and in Northern Ireland, rituals of commemoration were strictly regulated under the Flags and Emblems Act. The fear of Irish nationalism was so pronounced that you could go to jail in the north just for displaying the tricolor flag of the Republic. As a girl, Dolores donned her best white frock for Easter Sunday, a basket full of eggs under her arm, and pinned to her chest an Easter lily to commemorate the botched rebellion. It was an intoxicating ritual for a child, like joining a league of secret outlaws. She learned to cover the lily with her hand when she saw a policeman coming. She was under no illusion, however, about the personal toll that devotion to the cause could extract. Albert Price never met his first child, an older daughter who died in infancy while he was behind bars. Dolores had an aunt, Bridie, one of Chrissy's sisters, who had taken part in the struggle in her youth. On one occasion in 1938, Bridie had been helping to move a cache of explosive when it suddenly detonated